If you want to learn C++ or you are interested in it, you are at the right place. I started programming with the beginning of this channel. Use the timestamps for a better overview by hovering over the time bar, and not to forget, if you like the content and want to be part of the future community, consider to subscribe and leave a like. And with this, let's start the video. Today we continue with our website that we are learning with, and our next chapter is chapter 1.3, Introduction to Objects and Variables. And first we start with what is data and values. As in the last episode, we learned that statements, or that our code contains out of statements, and those statements are basically data. And what is this data doing? And like this key insight says, programs are collections of instructions, so that means our statements, that manipulate data to produce a desired result. So the data, our program that we program, can change the outcome that is actually displayed later on your screen. So if we have our example, I have Visual Studio with our Hello World example. Here we have our data Hello World, and when we run it, we can see that here we print out Hello World, and that is basically our data that is printed into the console. And we could say that we want to change our value here, and it's just hello now, and then our data contains only hello. And this is how data works in a very simple way, and there are multiple data forms, just simple forms, that a single piece of data is called a value, just to say that. And then a value could contain a letter, a number, or just some text like hello, and later you find out that there are many more things that values can contain. And now I quickly want to talk about random access memory, because it's very important that you know how a computer works when your program is started, because you load your hard-coded program into the RAM, like we know it now, the data or the statements, and then, like it says here, to store values and calculate it while the program is running. This is what the RAM does. When you start a program, it can manipulate our data directly and can work with it. And you can imagine, or you can think of the RAM like little numbered boxes that will be accessed while the program is running. And that's the RAM, and this is why it's very important that we have it. Otherwise, our computer could simply not run, because our values could not be calculated while the program is running. And now we go to objects and variables. An object is basically a place to store a value in your program. And in C++, if you want to access a object, it is not stored in a specific place that you have to declare, for example, like mailbox number 7532. No, it's anonymous. So the compiler directly addresses some space for it, and you don't have to address it by yourself. It will do that. And then we have here the key insight that explains us everything. An object is used to store a value in memory, like we said before, and a variable is an object that has a name, an identifier. And we have a very cool example down here, or a very simple integer example, and is called x. The integer is basically the declaration what we want to store. We want to store integers for a number from 0 to something about 32 million, I think. I'm not sure about it exactly, and the x is the name for it, like it says, the identifier. And we could name whatever we want, and for example we could also call it number 1, and it would know that. And then naming our object lets us refer to them again later in the program. So if we say, for example, somewhere else in our program we want to have number 1, the number 1 somewhere, then we can just say number 1, and then it will print us out our number or put our number in the location where we need it. And now we come to variable instantiation, and it is basically what I said before, that we have to declare an integer, because it will explain this example here. This is a number and we have to declare our variable by x, or we just have to give it a name, and then the compiler gives our number a place to store, and this is random. For example, we have here the location 114 40, and when the variable x is called out somewhere else, then it will run or go to the location 114 and is searching for the value there that we define it later. Here in this example we have no value, it is just we want to have a number, and this number, whatever it will be later, it is called out by x. And now data types. Data types are basically a value of a number, a letter, or a text, for example, and we have to declare it by a specific variable. For example, if we want to have a number, we have to take the integer variable that we can address it to a number. And for a letter or a text, we have for each category a separate variable or also an object that we can put into for this. And then here we have an example with another object or variable with a double and then width. And this here, the double means that it is an integer, but it is an integer with a dot in between. For example, 1.2 or 1.3, 1.6 or whatever. With integer you can only use full numbers and not one with a point in between. And in C++ you can also create custom types of data types, and this is also a reason why C++ is very powerful. And we will look into all these different types in the future lesson. And now we define multiple variables. First we have the example with two integer variables, a and b, and we just make one on the top and one on the bottom, and this works fine. And we can do also both in one line with a comma in between, and this works also fine. And now there are multiple ways that you could do it wrong, and when you do that you don't have to declare the integer a second time, otherwise it will not work. And you just do it like that, like we showed before. And if you do initialize another form of variable, for example double, you have to make a semicolon because it's another type of value, so it wouldn't work otherwise if you do it on the same line, so you do it separately. Like in this example, it's very recommended to do first the integer and then the double. And a best practice example here, although the language allows you to do so, avoid defining multiple variables of the same type in a single statement. So don't do here integer a comma b, make it separate, because like it says, instead define each variable in a separate statement on its own line, and then use a single line comment to document what it is used for, so it is much better to read your code later. And now we come to the summary. In C++, when we create an object, it is access to our memory, and when we name an object, it's a variable, and our variable has an identifier in this way. And this identifier is the name of the object, and we can access it from everywhere in our program if we have declared it right. And in the next lesson we look into our variables, how we can actually give them a value. And now we come to our questions for this one. What is data? It's basically all the statements that we have in our code, and we look, data is information that we can be moved, processed, or stored by a computer. Yes, in other sense, those are the statements, and this is just another explanation, maybe a little bit more detailed. What is a value? A value is a value or a number or a letter or a word declared to an object or a variable. And now a value is a letter A, number, instance, some other useful concept that can be represented as a data, yes, or an object that we learned. And what is a variable? A variable is an object that we have declared with an identifier. And a variable is named a named region of a memory that can be used to store a value. And what is an identifier? It is basically the name of the object, for example an integer, and the identifier is the x that we had before. An identifier is the name that a variable is accessed by. And what is a type? Type is what we want to define it as, an integer or a double like we had in our example. There are a lot more, for example strings and vectors, and there are a lot more. And a type tells the program how to interpret a value in memory, yes, the numbers or letters or characters. And what is an integer? An integer is basically a type defined for defining a number in a variable. And an integer is a number that can be written without a fractional component. Yeah, and that's it for today's video. In the next video we continue with the lesson 1.4, variable assignment and initialization. And with that, I hope you learned something or enjoyed it watching it. And with that, I say bye.